My name is Alison Kaplon.
My name is Leigh Pinkston. I'm a senior at Wellesley.
My name is Serenity.
Hi, I'm Dom.
Courtney Jackson, and I'm a senior.
All right. My name is Allie Ang.
My name is Myra Ahmed. I'm class of 2017 at Wellesley.
I'm Bernice Chan.
Hi, my name is Ananya G, and I'm a sophomore here at Wellesley College.
I'm a junior here, and I'm an ethnic studies individual major, the only one at Wellesley in history. So ethnic studies is the study of race as a social construction, and it values minorities' experiences and lived experiences historically and present day, and like issues revolving around that. And why I chose to have that as my major is because I felt like a really big divide in terms of the community I was coming from, and like being here at Wellesley at like this elite small liberal arts college. Like my parents are Chinese immigrants. Like they came here when they were young, like a bunch of other immigrants. And what a lot of times that we study in higher ed, it's something that like can't translate directly back. Like you can't tell them about the readings that you did. And things like that, and having such a major was more humanizing in terms of relating like my connection from higher ed to the community where I'm from.
During my first week here at Wellesley, during orientation week, a bunch of students, we gathered together downstairs at Lulu, and we were asking one another, why did you choose Wellesley? And when it was my turn to answer the question, one of my peers cut me off and said affirmative action. And you could tell that everyone else was surprised and maybe disgusted by her statement, but I sort of shrugged it off because I'm used to things of that nature being said to me.
So growing up in a very small community that was predominantly white, I think one of the big differences was that a lot of kids hadn't had exposure to different types of people. And so I remember one time when I was 5, I was playing on the playground with one of my friends who was white, and he came up to me and asked me why I was so dark and if I'd spend a lot of time in the sun. And I just remember thinking, like, what made you kind of think that? Like, because I'd always been that way, and I never thought it was odd because people in my family are relatively darker. So, yeah, I think things like that kind of shaped the way that they thought. And I mean, not having exposure to anyone who was black or anyone who was Hispanic or anyone who was any other race basically made it really difficult for them to see, like, yes, as a child, there are people of other colors and other ethnicities.
So for me, I had a little bit of a different upbringing and a little bit of a different familial background. So I was adopted from China when I was 6 months old, and I was raised in a white family in New York. So growing up, I would frequently be told by a multitude of people that I would be acting white, or I displayed white mannerisms. And in terms of what I wrote for I2M Wellesley, I have heard on multiple occasions that people say to me that I am basically white.
Given my situation and given that pretty much everyone in my school was white, I had a pretty good experience growing up compared to some other people. I think most people were pretty accepting and understood that I was just a little bit different, but didn't really take it very much into consideration when they decided to be my friend or something like that.
So sometimes I've heard, what are you? Or I love your mix. Oh my gosh, I want that mix. And I think people don't understand that it's not easy being mixed race. For those of us who are mixed race, and in no way can I speak for all of us, but for me and for several of my mixed race friends at Wellesley, it's difficult. Sometimes we feel like we're the outsider within, like we're relegated to the peripheries of a marginalized community, sort of like we're on the fringes. We don't always feel comfortable in certain spaces. And more often than not, we feel like it's a balancing act between cultures, between our backgrounds.
So like last semester I was in a class called Education, Immigration, and Social Mobility, and the entire topic was on immigration, and like the power of education and like the complexities with like the education system and how that relates to immigration. And for my final project we had to do a portraiture of someone who was related to immigration, and I chose to do my mother. So I, like for the first time ever, I had the chance to bring her into my classes in terms of like having her voice heard, and I like conducted an interview with her, and then I ended up writing like 20 pages about her immigration story here to America, her experiences in the education system, and how like my generation of my sister and I are related to her. And it was really cool because that's not something that's there's in academia there's not always a space to have such stories like that heard, and it's really a lot of like faculty, especially faculty of color here, who allow students to bring those voices in. And having ethics studies major allowed it was a way for me to not only incorporate like my own experiences and where like my family's coming from, but also see the connections between that and other students on campus, other experiences I've heard.
When I was in high school, I think about my 10th grade year, a lot of my friends started getting on this whole natural movement. So it's just like being comfortable not only in your own skin, but with your natural hair. And for me, it was a really big step for me to be able to get to that place, not only because of the fact, and I didn't even realize it at that point, but this subliminal doctrine that society had given me over so many years with the idea that my hair was supposed to be straight. And it took a lot of convincing and a very long transition period before I was able to like actually feel very comfortable with the fact that I was growing my hair out.
It's obviously a stereotyping issue in regards to people being uncomfortable about how I'm acting because it doesn't fit into this stereotypical like Asian woman that they have in their mind, and that people just kind of seem to have me identify as a white person for them.
Okay, so Wham Slam is the Wellesley Academic Action Movement, Siblings Leading Action for Multiculturalism. This is part 2 because in 2001, a lot of students also gathered together to fight for things that the college was lacking, such as having Asian American studies, having full-time advisors, an advisor to students of Asian descent, amongst other things that were lacking, like a multicultural space, and just a commitment to having more diverse faculty and a more inclusive curriculum. And since that in 2001, and not all the demands have been met, because when history doesn't change, it repeats itself until it does change. And like at this point, we are pushing again for that change. And so what it is it's students coming together to fight for ethnic studies on this campus, inclusive of a Latino studies minor, and having multicultural space, because right now, the students of color on this campus have one room in a building, and it's a really ugly room, and we all have to share it, and we have to reserve it before we even go there. And that's physically not a space, but it's also, it doesn't bring like a cultural communal space into having like just a comfortable place where we can relax. What it is also a place for students who often feel like they don't have their voices heard on campus, and who feel like they are largely disconnected from the typical image of what a Wellesley community is and what a typical Wellesley student should be doing. If they feel disconnected from that, like this is a space where people can come together. And I've heard from some people that it gives like a lot of meaning to their experience at Wellesley in terms of fighting for something bigger than themselves, like more than just their academics.
If I had $1 for every time some white boy told me I was exotic or spicy or curry or cafe au lait, I think I'd have a lot of money, and that's still in just like $1 bills. it was over the summer, and we were talking about going to the beach and hanging out, and I was like, yeah, I really want to get, like, darker, I want to get tanner, and he was like, you don't need to, like, you're perfect just the way you are, and I was like, yeah, but, like, I like being tanner, and he was just like, no, you should stay just that color. You're really pretty for a brown girl. I think that when talking about it with my friends later, I realized just, like, how uncomfortable and, like, weird and, like, messed up that was, but at the moment I just kind of, like, awkwardly laughed and was like, okay. I think there's a lot of things that we're trained to just deflect, and we're told to not make a scene and to just move on from certain things, and I'm definitely trying to learn to actually talk to people about how they're saying is problematic, but at the moment I was just like, okay, next conversation topic.
The first time my mom permed my hair was when I was 6. And for me, that was sending a message that my hair was too much. It was too difficult, too coarse, too nappy, too tangled for anyone to try to deal with. And that I was offending people with the state of my natural hair. And I'd had perms all my life until that point, until actually there were different periods in which my hair was falling out, and I was a kid. So that's a really weird thing for you to, like, not even realize that, like, I watched my mom freak out over, like, pulling the comb through my hair and realizing that it was coming out in, like, pretty reasonable clumps. And it's just that whole idea with the focus on the frustration that there was something wrong there. Like, my hair was always a problem. Black hair is always a problem.
When I was in 5th grade, I was taking French for the first time, and it was my first foreign language. And, you know, we're like 10, 11, I don't even know, and we're learning different describers, like, I am a girl, I am a boy, I have short hair, whatever. And we were taught to say, I am American. For context, this was in Cambridge, so, like, one of the most, like, liberal places in America. And my French teacher looks at me and goes, you're not American. And I didn't really think anything of it. I was 10. I came home that day, and my dad asked me what I'd learned at school, and I told him that my French teacher said that I wasn't American. To this day, I have never seen my father flip a shit quite like that day. Only now do I realize how incredibly rude that is. Rude, racist, like just so out of place. And once again, if you're 10 years old and you're being confronted by a teacher about this, and you're the only person who looks like you do, when your teacher is white, your class is white, you are younger than everyone else, and you have not been taught yet to understand that you are different, and different in a bad way, it makes it really difficult to stand up for yourself.
Growing up in a white community, most people I knew didn't really have much cultural background or much ethnic background, or didn't have much exposure to any kind of ethnic diversity. Which really meant that I was the only exposure they had, which was a little bit of pressure, but it was also, sometimes I found it was difficult to fit in, or in some situations it would be just really hard to relate on some different levels, just some of the ways my parents acted, or the way my family was, and the ways theirs were.
I went to a science and technology, math, whatever, based high school. And we did research projects every year, which was a really big thing for us, in which we would spend the entire year working on these projects in the lab, or research, doing actual tangible literary research, or whatever that project would entail. And it would all lead up to these really big competitions and symposiums and a variety of opportunities. One of my black classmates, had, I think, like, wavy extensions in her hair. And I never thought anything of this, or that there was anything wrong with it. There isn't anything wrong with it. Our research teacher approached her a week away from one of the symposiums and asked her with the most intense severity, so what are you going to do with your hair? she looked back to her confused and just completely misunderstanding like where she was coming from, whether or not she was saying this in jest. She repeated the question, so what are you going to do with your hair? The student responded, I'm keeping it the way it is. I don't understand what your qualms are of this. Like, do you have an issue with it, like, personally? She said, it's unprofessional. You won't be seen as a presenter. It's unkept. You should do something with it.
So I want to start with a word, and the word is ghetto. And in my opinion, ghetto is not an adjective. It's not a way to describe people and things. It's a way to talk about a place where people may be of a similar background, maybe underprivileged. Thus, when I first came to Wellesley, I was a part of a group of people who I thought were pretty close to me, but one of the girls chose to use this word to describe me. And that was definitely the first racially charged incident at Wellesley where I was quite offended. And I have not forgotten about that moment, clearly, because I'm a senior now. And I think it really offended me just because the use of the word meant that she had not taken any time to get to know who I was or where I was from, and based who I was on the color of my skin, basically. And I was just really offended, and I think that I felt marginalized. I felt like ostracized from the rest of the group, particularly because it wasn't a very diverse group. There weren't many Black people there. And it was just not a positive influence on my time at Wellesley. Unfortunately, my first reaction was to pull away from those people and not necessarily to explain why it was offensive. And I think that was a bad response, because then by the time that I got the courage to explain why it was offensive, it just seemed like it was taken lightly and it was a joke. And then I don't think that they really understood how much it affected me, using that language towards me and also just making it seem like my emotions were trivial. I don't think if someone else had said it to them, had made them realize that it was an offensive statement, calling someone ghetto, that they would change their reaction. And so I just pulled away from them.
I've always felt kind of caught between two polarized identities, and I've always felt like pressured to choose between them, either literally as in like having to just check one race on like a form, or figuratively when choosing which communities I choose to join. And even when people are not specifically like exclusive against me because of my mixed race identity, I still don't really feel like I fit into certain communities. Like in high school especially, people would tell me that I'm not really Asian, or like not Asian enough to be in certain groups, and but I was also too Asian to be white, and it was just kind of hard for me to be caught between those two sides of my identity. And people often ask, like, what are you? And things like that. And that all kind of makes me feel like I don't really belong in any particular group. And it's kind of similar because I'm also bisexual, and a lot of bisexuals face erasure from straight communities and from queer communities, and they're often told to like choose, or that they're not really queer. And so both of those parts of my identity are very similar in that I often feel like I have to choose.
I have no reason to justify myself to anyone else because who I am makes them uncomfortable.
Mainstream society fetishizes us and calls us the future amalgamated mega race, which is intimidating. And even within the mixed race community, there's a hierarchy that exists where white is prioritized, the white plus that other, which is white plus usually a POC component. But what if white is not a part of our immediate ancestry? What if our ancestry doesn't fit into even 2 categories? What if it doesn't fit into 3 or 4? what then?
There was also a case in which an elementary school age girl was told that her afro was a distraction to other students and that she needed to go home and her mother needed to do something with it, that she needed to straighten it, that it was put in the same line as other abnormal hairstyles that the school had banned, such as like dyeing your hair red or like having it in a crazy cut. Other things and aspects that you do to your hair that you have complete and full control over. But this little girl's natural state was considered offensive. The whole idea that black hair is something that society has to come to terms with, that it is like this fascination of a gaze coming from the external community, something that nobody else is able to understand for whatever reason, and it's not just seen as hair, is incredulous to me for a variety of reasons.
So one of the things that pisses me off the most about cultural appropriation is that it's like different people want this part of your culture without all of the other things that come with it. Like, you want to wear a bindi and you want to wear a sari because you look cute and exotic, but you don't want to have to be part of the model minority myth. You don't want to have to ascribe to things like not looking like everyone else in your classroom. You don't want the difficult things that come with being Indian. You just want the cool and fun parts of it, and that's not okay.
I think there is work definitely to gain a broader perspective on the students here. And I think that it started with the Ethnic Studies Conference, and it definitely happens when cultural organizations try to pair up and talk about issues and talk about where they're from and just get to understand each other. But I think there's definitely a greater community of people who are not a part of those cultural groups and don't really have like a comprehensive knowledge on how things that they say may offend people, and how even when people try to educate them, they don't have an open ear. They're not like open to learning how to be more sensitive to people's cultural backgrounds and just what they say to people.
At Wellesley, what's really nice is that people are generally quite accepting of me for who I am on all sides of my identity. And but I feel like we really need to work on not homogenizing all groups of people at Wellesley. Like, there's no one way to be queer. There's no one way to be a person of color or to be Asian American.
What people don't realize is that statements like this can lead to insecurity and depression. For the longest time, I thought that being black was horrible, and I would try to distance myself from all black people just so that I could be accepted, because I didn't like feeling as if I was less superior, and I didn't like feeling like people were disgusted by me just because of my skin color. But, over time, I began to realize that being black is beautiful and that I should be proud of who I am. But things like that, by saying you got into Wellesley because of affirmative action, can be hurtful. And, things like that should never be said to anyone, because we, minority students, got into Wellesley on the same merits as anyone else, and we belong just as much as everyone else does.
So I think my time at Wellesley has shown me a lot about how different people from different communities see the world, and what kind of backgrounds they bring. I think at Wellesley I've met a lot of people with similar cultural backgrounds and a lot of people with other very, very different backgrounds, and it's helped me see the advantages a diverse community can bring.
There have been multiple instances of this, not only in the news where a news anchor had her job threatened because of her natural hair and the fact that it did not meet the quote-unquote criterion, aka white criterion, of straight, presentable, even, normalized, this whole idea of straight hair. I have had several instances in which my white counterparts or other counterparts in general feel comfortable putting their fingers into my hair. I don't get it. I don't get it.
For some of us, we're constantly navigating the space, that sort of gray space, between who we are and how we identify, and how society reads us, how society sees us. For some of us, we don't know anything other than that space. We sort of get used to it. That's probably not the right way to say it. We don't get used to it. We just sort of learn how to go through life and navigate those spaces. So it's not easy being mixed.
I believe that we should be able to feel more comfortable, prominent, and interactive members of society, not something or people that are fetishized because of this miraculous curly poof on top of our heads. Like, that should not iconicize us as a people. That should not be all that we are dwindled down to, this image, because we're so much more than that. We're pivotal members of society. We're business people. We're doctors. We're lawyers. We're students. And we deserve to be treated and have that. We deserve to have that level of significance that everybody else has, regardless of the acknowledgement of this or anything else.
No problem. Thanks, you guys.
Great. That was awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
What
We'll
do
see.
you have to study for?
Just as a heads up. Thank you so much. You have an awesome class.
That was great. That was really great. Wow. Oh my God, I've been interviewed. Mom.
So official.
I'm gonna win an Emmy.
Talk about it.
Oh my God.
We'll see. It's gonna be incredible.
Good? All right. Solid. I'm going to go to lab.
So when in doubt, don't wear a bindi. Sorry, that's just
I love that closing, like when in doubt.
Yeah, because that's like, I don't know, I have more feelings about that than I do about